Now let's go back to that story about the currency in circulation dropping, and perhaps if it's a good thing or not. Currency outside the bank drops. Implications for the economy. We are having this conversation with the Chief Executive Officer of the CFG Advisory, Mr. Adebajo. Mr. Adebajo, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning.
So should we be celebrating this? Seems like the target or the aim of the central bank is gaining fruit.
Well, unfortunately, I'm a fan of currency outside the banking system. And the reason why I'm a fan of having a lot of money in the currency outside the banking system is because the informal sector in this country contributes 50% to our GDP and makes up 50% of our economy. And this is the lifeline for the informal sector. But when you have a situation where you have inflation that is high and persistent with stagflation, I think it's important to constrict as much of the money supply as possible, especially when total money supply has increased by 75% year on year to a record 100 trillion. So I think it's important that we constrict as much of the money supply for now, pending when the economy can recover, and then we can begin to go on a path of growth. So mixed feelings, mixed results.
Well, shouldn't we be looking the way of financial inclusion, for instance? Perhaps we do not really need that much money in circulation. We should be looking at the way of expanding the inclusion net when it comes to financial. So even the informal sector can be captured, and it's also aid planning.
Well, yes, but if you consider the amount of population in this country, if you look at the population of this country and if you take a look at the amount of bank accounts compared to, there are more mobile phones than bank accounts in Nigeria. So the banks have not really gone through that financial inclusion step, and we're moving there. A lot of progress has been made, a lot of progress remains, but I think cash is still king when it comes to the informal sector economy in Nigeria today. But we must admit that there has been significant progress with the digital transactions, which has reached record levels.
So now we've seen inflation taper, we've seen GDP grow to above 3%, we're seeing currency in circulation reduce. Does it mean that the reforms that, seem to have been tightening us before now, are we beginning to see the fruit?
Well, not really. What I would say is the fact that the economic recovery is on track, I think, without a doubt. My own prediction is that it's going to be an 18-month period, and we should begin to see results by June next year if we stay the course. But what we are seeing now are good signs. The direction of growth and the direction of inflation, the trajectory is in the right direction, although not optimal. But I think what that tends is that it allays the fears of recession. So what is clear now is that we're not going into a recession, and I think that is positive, but a lot of work still needs to be done, especially on the fiscal side. We must acknowledge also that the debt to revenue numbers have reduced by about 30%, which is also a positive signal. 4.5 trillion of ways and means has been paid back, and revenue collection has improved with the use and deployment of technology, which is putting more money to the subnationals. The states are getting a lot more money. And also the exchange rate differential tends to help. The volatility for the exchange rates have abated, which is also good. But a lot still needs to be done, especially with the social intervention programs. You cannot, it's like you're going to the dentist to remove a tooth without anesthesia. So these social intervention programs are critical to cushion the effects of these reforms. And as we've seen with the 2-day strike and protest early in August this year, social unrest is a critical issue. And as we say it in Nigeria, stomach infrastructure is something that is critical. So while these reforms are going on, government needs to step up on the social intervention programs.
Yeah, but wouldn't you say they are doing a lot in that area? We've seen the suspension of import tariff for some basic staples. We've seen trucks of rice being sent to states and among others. Wouldn't you say that is enough? Or which other area do you think could also be added to what's already in existence?
Yeah, with all due respect, sending trucks of rice to states is not the solution to this problem. This is a bigger problem than sending trucks of rice to each of the states. I think one of the things we should look at is the tariff structure which they have reduced for food importation. I think that's a step in the right direction. There are structural issues that we need to address in terms of food security in Nigeria. And I think that the security situation in the Northeast, the Middle Belt, which is the breadbasket of Nigeria, which is preventing farmers from going to farm, I think is something that we need to address. Because if we cannot produce locally, then because of insecurity, then that is a challenge that we need to address. The structural issues, like I said, these tariffs, these short-term tariffs, I think are a step in the right direction. But there are fundamental issues that include structural reforms that we also need to address. But what is also not helping is the reckless expenditure by the federal government. I think fiscal discipline, I think, is also very important. If you lead by example, I think a lot of people will follow. So those are the issues that we need to address. The issue now is the fact that stomach infrastructure, hunger, is a number one issue in Nigeria today. And if you do not address these issues, it will impact negatively on the desired results from the reform program.
So I think another area that might also call for attention is the issue of infrastructure, post-harvest losses, infrastructure, getting the products from the farm to the market. Apart from that, security, which is a major one, because of course we know that post-harvest losses in Nigeria is about 50%. And also now we see prices crashes, so some of those crops, because it's harvest period. And then after the harvest period, most likely we get back to status quo. So I guess we also have to look at the issue of preservation, storage, and infrastructure, logistics to get those crops to the market.
That really is not a problem if there's a demand for produce. And I think there's nowhere that you do not sustain a bit of loss in terms of production. But I think government should now focus its intervention, after all these crops have been produced, or all these produce have come out, government should now focus its attention on the intervention to reduce post-harvest losses. I think if you're intervening in that area, then I think the benefits will be more significant. And I think that should be the focus once we can restore agricultural output to the pre-banditry levels.
Well, we look forward to those days. But I know that CFG, you have your forecast and you'll be looking at the numbers. How do you see this year, 2024? I know you said the reforms benefit should be in about 6 months, which is next year. But how do you see this year ending, 2024?
Well, the way I see this 2024 ending is on the trajectory we're going. As we can see the inflation trajectory is coming down. There's really no issue with the increase in the electricity prices, because I think people have been using both generator and electricity at the same time. So if electricity is more expensive and I think it's more available, then I think people are spending less on the generators. So there might be some sort of savings there, because your electricity bill, you're used to a certain level of power bills. The challenge now is the price of PMS. Fuel. I think from what we're seeing with the shortages, I think there's no doubt that we should be looking at fuel prices going to about 1,000 naira per litre. It is this impact that concerns me in terms of being able to manage inflation, because the inflation trajectory is on its way down, though slightly, and we need to be steadfast with these policies. My expectation this year is for us to be more steadfast with these reform policies, the government needs to press the reset button. And more importantly, I think the time has come whereby government needs to sell some of its assets, which is like restructuring its balance sheet to be able to get more equity into it. NNPC has about 35 billion barrels of oil proven. If you look at this and you multiply it by the oil price of maybe $50, you can begin to understand the value of that oil. NNPC balance sheet is about 246 trillion, but it has idle assets that it has spent close to 22 trillion on without any desired results. So it is important now that the government should begin to sell down the oil mine licenses and the oil producing licenses to about 49% or even more than that, so that the serious players can begin to invest in that. And in the process, the government can raise $50 billion. The $50 billion the government will raise will help it reduce the debt burden and help it recapitalize NNPC so that we can have sustained revenue and, more importantly, foreign exchange availability. Because the inefficiencies in NNPC is weighing Nigeria down at a point in time where oil prices are $80 a barrel, where Nigeria should be smiling. More importantly, all the cancelled. They should be refinanced with structured debt, most probably long-term Euro bonds, which is cheaper, is more transparency, and we can get more accountability. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done within NNPC to ensure foreign exchange availability and revenue assurance for government. So I think this is now long overdue, considering where we are right now. If we can do these things and steadfast with this reform process, then we should end the year better. But like I said, all these policies are not of concern to me. The most important...
Seems we lost Mr. Adebajo there. I do hope we can get him to complete his thought. And he was talking about the inefficiency in the NNPC. Yeah, you're back. Yes, you're back now. You can complete your thought.
Important issues now are the hunger issues. And I think this is really what the government needs to address urgently.
So you talked about, of course, the debt burden, funding the budget and all of that. We know that today, I think today is the last day for that first USD domestic bond of the federal government, where they hope to raise 500 million. But of course, if our oil production first and foremost increases, then we could also look the way of reducing those borrowings, because it looks like they may go for a second one because they said it to be in series, in tranches, so suggesting the sale of assets and all of that. But we've been talking about this for a bit, that's the sale of government assets, the cost of running the government, but it doesn't seem like we're moving forward with that. I wonder if you think there's something that can be done, perhaps the people, the media, to push the government in this direction.
Well, I think what is happening now is that we're getting to a situation whereby we cannot continue to borrow. Although there's been a 30% reduction in revenue to debt ratio, which is positive, giving the government some headroom, the debt profile is now close to 121 trillion naira, which is a record high. And the debt, the cost of servicing that debt this year alone is close to 8.5 trillion naira. So clearly you can see that we can no longer continue to go in this direction. So I think it's long overdue that we begin to take a look at all these things, because if we do not address these issues right now and head on, then it can stall the reform program and it can begin to cause problems for us, by this time next year. So it's very important that government takes some drastic steps. We still have the capacity to borrow, but at the end of the day, when that capacity stops, what are you going to do? So that is why it's important for us to begin to sell down some critical assets now and raise money to ease this debt burden.
All right, Mr. Adebajo, thank you so much for sharing your views with us. We do hope in the coming days and months that we would see some direction towards, some action towards that direction. Mr. Adebajo is the Chief Executive
Thank you.
Let's take a break now. When we come back, we'll see a bit of the market numbers from yesterday's close. To stay with us is Business Morning on Sunlight Daily.